Saints, I did not know we killed Jesus Christ. Like, I didn't know, but Charlie Kirk died, and people are losing because we've killed the Lamb of God or something similar. This really reminds me when Nipsey Hussle died. I remember I was doing content for Rap Snacks, the potato chip brand at the time, and they hit me up like, yo, we got to put something out because Nipsey Hussle just died. And my first reaction was, who is Nipsey Hussle? I had no clue. I've never heard of this dude. Like, who? What? Same thing here. It's like, I don't know who Charlie Kirk is. And yet the world just stops. Like, nobody can go on now. Everyone's eternally wounded. Like, this is the most important person who's ever lived. No clue who this man was. So, naturally, I'm getting caught up and I'm seeing all the things. And I'm just like, wow. So, let's just go down the line. First things first. The immediate thing was there's all this stuff that comes up that this person is really polarizing and controversial. Now, if you listen to white folks, he's controversial because he's just telling the truth. And there's a lot of back and forth about that. Now, here's the thing. Let's just pretend, right, for make believe, that Charlie Kirk only said things that were factual and he was just giving a lot of statistics that maybe people didn't like to hear because they tell a very ugly picture about particularly black folk, right? Let's pretend that that's true. Does that make him a racist? Yeah. And the reason why I say that is I can give you a lot of negative statistics about America right now, how we're at the bottom of a lot of things. We're not on top of anything, right? I mean, definitely murder with handguns. We are killing it there. We are killing it in a lot of things that are not great. But as far as like, anything that you want to be at the top on, our healthcare system or, the ability to actually improve our transportation infrastructure or just learning and educational outcomes, we are not killing it. And what about our trade balances with different countries and stuff like that? I mean, I could point to those statistics and I can make the conclusion that Americans must be just terrible people. We must be inherently inferior. We must not work very hard. We must be late. Like, I can do a lot of things with those stats, but nobody does that. People go the extra step and say, okay, well, why is that? And how do we go about fixing that? Because you love America, right? Now, if you don't like America, you're going to say there's something deficient within you. You're inherently bad or something like that. And so it is here. People only reach for those statistics because you are inherently anti-black and you want to justify your anti-blackness and it makes you feel good. But again, this country that you love so much, if I start spitting all the negative statistics, you're going to give me all the reasons and explanations. And then we're going to say, well, we should really do something. If you're not a racist, you would do that for Black America too, no matter what the stats say. But you don't do that because you are inherently anti-black. That's who you are at your core. And the reason why so many people love you is because you are articulating that which they wish they could. It's that simple. There's nothing more to this. Let's just be 100. Because the reality is this. If Charlie Kirk made his whole career going about saying things that Jewish people found to be anti-Semitic, hear me clearly. If he just made a life saying things that Jewish people thought were anti-Semitic and were, inherently just biased and painted people in a negative light that were Jewish, even if the rest of us did not agree that these things were necessarily anti-Semitic, if Jewish people felt like it was anti-Semitic, nobody would be expecting Jewish people to feel sentiment for this or to feel sorry or acknowledge this man's family. Nobody would expect that. If someone who were actually anti-Semitic, that they felt was anti-Semitic, were saying things that offended them, nobody would have an expectation of Jewish people that they would be given a damn. So why do you expect me to care? There's a distinction between me rooting for your death and me being completely apathetic to your death. There's a difference. Am I rooting for anyone's death? Not necessarily, but I can be apathetic. Like, okay, you didn't care about me. I don't care about you. I don't know what you want me to do about this. The reality is whom you offend matters. So if you went about, again, saying things that were anti-Semitic, everybody would understand. right? If Hitler dies, people are actually going to celebrate. Osama bin Laden died. People celebrated. Nobody said Osama bin Laden has a family, because he did have a family. But nobody cared because you thought he was a bad person. So if I think you're a bad person, and if I don't really think you rock with me, yeah, I'm allowed to be apathetic towards your death. I am. That may hurt your feelings. I don't really care. Let's just call it what it is, because we have normalized anti-blackness. We have been so indifferent to black suffering and black pain. We just don't matter. So yes, someone can be blatantly anti-black in my face, and you all would tell me I'm the crazy person because I'm supposed to feel something for this man, and I don't. Now, the next thing about this is all the Christians. I don't know what to do with this part. And I said this, I made a little video and I posted on my personal social media, and I said, I don't believe that it's right to reject Christianity based on the actions of Christians. I don't think that's right. And I don't think that's fair. And that's why I didn't do that. What I did in my own personal life is I rejected Christianity based on the merits itself, based on the merits of the faith, the Bible, all the things, right? I just objectively looked at that and says, hey, that doesn't really work for me. And I think that's completely fair. But Christians don't help. And I said that the racism in the church alone would be enough. I just saw and I'm seeing so many good church people who are apparently completely okay with a lot of racism. They're completely okay with anti-blackness, and it just serves. It's just another fresh reminder. And I said this back in the day in the 90s. There was a preacher out of L.A., Fred Price. Fred Price built a mega church in the hood, Crenshaw Christian Center in Crenshaw. He had like 10,000 members or something like that. And he was really in with like the word of faith crowd. These are the people, you just got to have faith, speak the word, and you can kind of get money, get rich, whatever. Okay. And this became a big deal. And one of the sort of fathers of that movement was a guy by the name of Kenneth Hagin Sr. And Kenneth Hagin was a big deal for a long time. And he has a son. They call him Kenneth Hagin Jr. I don't think he's technically a junior, but whatever. And long story short, Kenneth Hagin Jr. one day just goes off during the sermon about interracial marriage, right? Now, Fred Price is really cool with them. He, speaks at their meetings all the time, whatever. And so black folks come to Fred like, yo, did you hear this? Ain't this your boy? And so Fred reaches out to Kenneth Hagin Jr. like, hey, you want to maybe, I don't know, walk this back? And I guess Fred doesn't really get a response all like that. So Fred says, well, let me just go to his dad. Surely the great Kenneth Hagin Sr., this father of the Word of Faith movement, he'll correct his son. And I guess the response was about the same. And this gets Fred to understand, and this is his words, roughly speaking, that he was just a house Negro. I think he actually said like a house nigger. I'd have to go back and look at the actual tape, but he's something like that. And he went off for an entire year. He did this series called Race, Religion, and Racism, and he wrote volumes of books about it. It is very worth checking out to this day. You can go to Crenshaw Christian Center, their ministry, their website, whatever. You can find these things. Go talk to them. It is. What was so groundbreaking about it is that he didn't focus on racism necessarily at large. He focused on racism in the church specifically. He went chapter and verse and just broke it down. And when I tell you they canceled that man, they pulled him off of networks and stations. He stopped getting invited places. Now, he didn't starve because he had a vibrant local congregation that, mostly black folks, and they liked it. But it just showed you like this demon is real, and that demon is yet to be cast out. And it does sort of beg the question, how can these people be such great Christians and racist? Like, how does that work? And I would argue if there's a reality to Christianity, if there's a reality to Christ and changing the hearts of people, it ain't happened over there. There's no way. Because look at the book of 1 John, and apologies, but let me go down the biblical trail here. The book of First John, chapter 1, they say, look, this is the message that we've heard from him, and we declare to you that God is light. So this is metaphorical terminology. Light is good, holy, righteousness. God is light, and in him, that is God, is no darkness. Darkness is unholy, sin, unrighteousness. In him is no darkness at all, none. There's no flaw, no imperfection with God, nothing. Then he says, if we say, maybe you will, maybe you won't, but if we say we have fellowship with him, that is God, communion, in tune, we rocking with God. If we say we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness. Now the word walk is in the Greek. In the Greek is the present tense. The present tense suggests continual action. So like the light's always green. There's no pause. There's no stop. There's no chill. You always on go. If we say we have fellowship with God, but walk in darkness, sin, unrighteousness, John says you are lying. So if we say we have fellowship with God, but we walk in racism for the last several hundred years, like, now again, don't get mad at me. I didn't write the Bible. I didn't write any of this. John said, you are lying. There's no way. Understand, slavery could not have happened outside of the church. Whether we're talking about the popes that gave license, whether we're talking about the individual slave holders, you do not get there without the church. I've talked about it before. One of the examples of the state of Georgia originally was not a slave state. Okay. You have the great George Whitefield, this revivalist preacher who wants to start an orphanage, but hey, I got to make these numbers work, so I need slavery. He lobbies and helps do this. Like, you don't get there without the church. And this demon has not been cast out. Whether you're talking about, for example, the Church of God in Christ, this big black denomination. Then you have the Assemblies of God, a white Pentecostal denomination. Same exact theology. And in fact, Bishop Mason, who founded the Church of God in Christ, ordained a lot of those early leaders in the Assemblies of God. Well, how come they didn't have one denomination? Take a wild guess. National Baptist Convention, black folks. Southern Baptist Convention, white folks. How did you end up having two Baptist conventions? Take a wild guess. This demon has not come out. It just hasn't. This demon has not come out. And so here you have Charlie Kirk. And the amount of love and devotion and this is Jesus. For white folk to love him this much, I'm sorry. It says something about you. He's obviously saying something that resonates with you. And you're willing to, either you're clinging to it or you're willing to ignore all the racism. Because deep down, this is how you feel. Because there's no way somebody can be an anti-Semite or even a Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer. Nobody would be asking other questions about, well, what about the other things that they said? Oh, they have a family. Nobody would care. White folk would understand, hey, that's a bad guy. But racism is not really wrong to you. You don't really see anything offensive about it. And deep down, it resonates with you. So that's why you can embrace Charlie Kirk. And then you have the audacity to ask me to give a damn. And so you got a few Uncle Toms who will go out here and celebrate and say, oh, he's such a wonderful guy. And I've had white friends who will point to that like, well, see, this black person. Yes. And every slave revolt was, well, not every, a good number of slave revolts were overthrown by black people too. Because the reality is, if you have 200 people on a plantation versus one or two white folk, the only way you keep that scheme up is to divide those 200 people. You have to completely warp their mind, or at least enough of them to make them think that this makes sense. And that is true today. You had black overseers on plantations. That did not make the system any less racist and didn't make them any less crazy. So we got to deal with this thing. We have to deal with this thing. We really do. We really do. Particularly, these church folk have showed their colors. And every now and then you just need that reminder that ultimately at the end of the day, God and Christ and all this stuff will always be secondary to that color and that racism. Now, I think Charlie Kirk, on the other hand, is healthy for us. I think, particularly as descendants of slavery, we need to hear people like this because the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights era, one of the unintended consequences, I think, well, I'm sorry, actually it was intended, but one of the unfortunate consequences is people like Charlie Kirk had to go underground. They couldn't be open anymore. You couldn't, you know what I mean? They couldn't say it out loud. And so it lulls you into sleep into thinking that this society actually is rooting for you, that people have actually changed. No, you need to hear and you need to engage with those thoughts. Let me be clear. I'm not saying you need to debate people like that. That is a waste of time. Because again, the only reason why you're pulling statistics is because you really feel this way deep down and you want to justify that. You want a foundation to stand on for your racism, a more polished foundation. It's not worth your time. It really isn't. You need to focus on your work, which is to challenge white dominance. But to do that, you need to know what people are thinking. You need to know what you're confronting and what you're up against. You absolutely do. You need to hear everything that they're saying. You need to understand what their logic is and be able to go around it or overcome it. You need to know what their thoughts are, and you need to come up with better thoughts, sharper thoughts, better ideas. Absolutely. I'm not with this whole thing where we run and hide. No, I need to hear. You need to hear it. We need to know exactly where they are. You need to know what type of logic you need to be challenging. Again, not to debate, but be very clear on the world that you live in. And if you really believe that racism is wrong, and if you really believe injustice is bad, then you need to take every thought and deconstruct it and get a better, sharper thought, a higher thought. Don't run from it. I think we need people to come out the closet and say exactly what it is. Hiding helps none of us.